human trash has already reached the single most inaccessible point on the surface of this entire planet. And it got there before careful scientific study did. At nearly 11,000 meters below the surface of the western Pacific Ocean lies a slot in the seafloor called the Challenger Deep, where the pressure is more than 1,000 times what it is at sea level. No one has fully explained how living cells survive intact under that kind of crushing force. The water down there hovers just above freezing, in total darkness that sunlight has never once touched. And the first confirmed descent to the bottom happened in 1960, inside a steel sphere called the Trieste. According to widely cited estimates, fewer people have made that descent than have walked on the surface of the moon. Over the next several minutes, we'll move through 12 documented facts about what has actually been found down there, building toward a discovery that arrived at the bottom of the ocean before the scientists studying it did. The Challenger Deep sits at the southern end of the Mariana Trench, a curved scar in the ocean floor near the Mariana Islands in the western Pacific. The trench itself stretches for roughly 1,500 miles, but the Challenger Deep is its single lowest point, deeper by a wide margin than Mount Everest is tall, deep enough that if the mountain were dropped into it, its peak would still sit beneath more than a mile of water. Here's a claim worth sitting with. Humanity has sent more people into low Earth orbit than to the floor of this trench. Whether that says something about our priorities, or simply reflects how much harder crushing pressure is to survive than vacuum, is worth arguing about in the comments. The trench takes its name from the HMS Challenger, a British survey ship whose crew first sounded its depth in 1875 using a weighted rope paid out hand over hand from the deck. They had no way to confirm what, if anything, lived down there, only a number that seemed almost too large to believe. It would take nearly a century before the location was mapped with any real precision, and longer still before anyone attempted to reach the bottom in person. That gap between discovery and verification is a pattern that repeats throughout this story. In 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh piloted the bathyscaphe Trieste to the bottom of the Challenger Deep, becoming the first people to do so, after a descent that took nearly 5 hours in a sphere barely large enough for 2 men to sit inside. Piccard later reported seeing a flatfish resting on the seafloor through the viewport, an observation some marine biologists have since disputed, arguing that the depth and visibility make the sighting difficult to confirm. Officially, the mission proved that a manned vehicle could survive the descent and return. The problem is that the specific biological claim from that first dive has never been fully settled. After that 1960 dive, no human being returned to the Challenger Deep for more than 50 years. It took until 2012, when filmmaker James Cameron piloted a solo submersible called the Deepsea Challenger to the bottom, alone, for nearly 3 hours of observation time before a mechanical issue cut the dive short. His mission confirmed what many oceanographers suspected but hadn't documented directly, that the seafloor was not sterile. Sediment samples and video from that dive renewed serious scientific interest in the trench's biology. That kind of descent has never been treated as routine, and one event explains why. In 2014, an unmanned submersible called Nereus, built by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, imploded without warning while diving in the Kermadec Trench, a separate deep trench elsewhere in the Pacific. The vehicle was destroyed instantly, and researchers monitoring the dive lost contact within a fraction of a second, with only debris surfacing afterward to confirm what had happened. It's a blunt reminder that even engineering built specifically to withstand these pressures can fail catastrophically, which is part of why expeditions to depths like the Challenger Deep remain rare, expensive, and treated with real caution rather than routine. One of the more surprising confirmed residents of the trench is a group of organisms called Xenophyophores, single-celled life forms that can grow large enough to see without a microscope. Researchers have recorded them at depths exceeding 10,000 meters, thriving in conditions that would rupture most complex cells almost instantly. The leading hypothesis is that their unusual cell structure and slow metabolism let them tolerate pressure that no land organism and few surface ocean organisms could withstand. What the data doesn't explain is why single-celled life adapted to this environment so successfully while more complex organisms remain comparatively rare there. Part of the answer to how any of this life endures that pressure appears to lie in chemistry rather than structure alone. Deep-sea researchers have found that many pressure-tolerant organisms accumulate high concentrations of a compound called trimethylamine N-oxide, sometimes shortened to TMAO, inside their cells, a molecule that appears to counteract the way immense pressure distorts and unfolds proteins. Generally, the deeper a species is found living, the higher the concentration of this compound researchers tend to measure in its tissue. It's a rare case where a single biochemical detail explains, at least partially, something that used to sound almost impossible. Life that isn't merely surviving crushing pressure, but appears chemically adapted to depend on it. Beyond the Xenophyophores, researchers have recovered small crustaceans called amphipods directly from trench sediment, along with bacteria that appear to require high pressure to function normally. Organisms scientists describe as piezophilic. These bacteria don't merely tolerate the crushing environment. Some samples reportedly slow or stop functioning entirely once brought up to standard surface pressure. That detail reframes what an extreme environment really means. An organism so specifically adapted to one kind of extremity that ordinary Earth conditions become hostile to it. If the kind of place that can support life like this is the sort of documented anomaly you find yourself thinking about afterward, that's exactly the territory this channel covers. And subscribing means the next one won't slip past you. How many other pressure-dependent organisms remain undiscovered in trenches no one has sampled yet is a question that, as of now, nobody can answer. Even now, less of the ocean floor has been mapped in fine detail than the surface of Mars or the far side of the Moon. Satellites and radar can resolve planetary surfaces from orbit, but water absorbs and scatters the signals that would let us do the same for the seabed. Detailed mapping of trenches like this one relies on sonar surveys conducted ship by ship, a slow and expensive process that has covered only a fraction of the deep ocean floor in high resolution. That's the practical reason the claim that we know more about the Moon than the ocean floor keeps showing up in serious scientific writing, not just as a talking point. In 2019, the 5 Deeps expedition, led by Victor Vescovo, carried out a series of piloted dives to the Challenger Deep aboard a submersible called the Limiting Factor. The expedition logged more descents to the trench floor in that single year than had occurred across the previous 6 decades combined. Vescovo and the expedition's scientists reported encountering what appeared to be several previously undocumented species of amphipods during those dives, alongside detailed depth readings recorded with modern sonar equipment, far more precise than anything available to earlier missions. This was, by most measures, the most thoroughly documented biological survey the trench had ever received. That same expedition also recorded something that had nothing to do with biology at all. A plastic bag, and what were described as candy wrappers, resting undisturbed on the sediment at the very bottom of the Challenger Deep. It wasn't the first time plastic debris had been logged there. The Deepsea debris database, maintained by Japan's Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology, already contained footage of plastic waste photographed at trench depths in prior years. Here's the detail that doesn't fit the story we usually tell about remoteness. The single most inaccessible point on the surface of this planet, a location far fewer people have visited than the surface of the Moon, had already been reached by human garbage before it had been reached by thorough scientific study. No one disputes that the debris is there. It's the implication that plastic pollution now counts among the best documented features of the deepest place on Earth that tends to cause the argument. The plastic itself is only part of the picture. A study led by researchers at Newcastle University, published in the journal Nature Ecology and Evolution, examined amphipods collected from the Mariana Trench and several other deep ocean trenches, and found industrial pollutants, including compounds banned for decades in most countries, present in the tissue of animals living at depths of 10,000 meters or more. According to the researchers, some of the contamination levels detected were comparable to what's found in some of the most heavily polluted rivers on the planet, not what anyone expected from one of the most physically isolated ecosystems on Earth. Officially, deep trenches were long assumed to be too remote for surface pollution to reach in meaningful concentrations. The problem is that ocean currents and the food chain itself appear to move contaminants downward far more efficiently than researchers had modeled. What remains undocumented is exactly how far this pattern extends, since detailed sampling still covers only a small fraction of the world's deep-sea trenches. Whether the Mariana Trench is an unusual case, or simply the first trench where scientists happened to look closely enough to find this, has not been demonstrated either way. Return to that number from the beginning. Nearly 11,000 meters down, under pressure more than 1,000 times what it is at the surface, in water that never warms and light that never arrives. That is not a place human beings are built to survive without extraordinary engineering. And yet, life has been confirmed there directly. Xenophyophores large enough to see, bacteria and amphipods chemically adapted to depend on the very pressure that would kill almost anything else. All of it sampled and studied across multiple expeditions spanning more than 60 years. That much is documented. What remains genuinely unresolved is less about whether life exists there, since that question has been settled, and more about the scale of what else is down there, and how far the reach of human activity actually extends into places once assumed to be beyond it. The plastic bag recorded on the trench floor in 2019 didn't get there by accident of geography. It got there because currents, gravity, and time move waste downward regardless of how remote the destination looks on a map. The same appears to be true of the industrial compounds found in trench amphipods, invisible but measurable, and apparently unbothered by 11,000 meters of seawater standing in the way. Whatever else researchers eventually find in the trenches still left unsampled, that particular contradiction, the deepest point on Earth reached by trash before it was reached by careful study, isn't going away. Somewhere in the trenches that haven't been surveyed yet, there may be more of what the Mariana Trench already showed us. Organisms adapted to conditions no one fully understands, and contamination that arrived there before anyone was watching. Nobody has demonstrated yet whether that combination is the exception or simply what every unexamined trench on this planet is quietly holding.